Hello, Exorcist. It is me, Jamie, just here by myself today, with the exception of Bing Bong. And so, for those of you who can't see, who maybe just be listening to this, I have my 60-pound black 11-year-old greyhound with me here. She was also with me me and Ryan in the last video as well. She's my little shadow. She likes to hang around with me. So she might move around a little bit, but she's a good girl. She's my baby. Both my dogs are rescues, but Bing Bong tends to like to hang around with me the most. But without further ado, so I have been teasing the upcoming episode about neurodivergence through the lens of the movie Long Legs, but I have gotten a couple questions since the first couple episodes, now that some folks have started to listen and have been asking for feedback and comments. And all right, I got some free time today, so I figured I would answer some of those questions. And so today I'm just going to talk about myself a little bit and tell you a little bit more about me and tell you who is Jamie Toops. First of all, to tell you a little bit about the whole last name situation, when I got married, my husband is Ryan Toops. And when we got married, we had a conversation. I was like, I'm not really sure I want to take your last name. I kind of really like my family's last name. And it is a pain in the ass for women to change their names, I'm telling you. And I just didn't want to do it. I told him, I was like, but I'll do it for you, if you think this is important. And he was like, you know what? I don't care, actually. I don't care one way or the other. I was like, are you sure? Are you super mega triple? Are you quadruple sure? And he was like, yeah, I don't care. Like, I don't know why people do that in the first place. If it makes you happy, if it makes you happy, if it's something that you want to do, it is a tradition. Some people don't want to be the association with their old families. Like, that's totally cool. Y'all do you, but it wasn't for me. And husband had no feelings about it one way or the other either. So cool. I kept my last name. But I'm not telling y'all, for those that don't know me, because I am an actively practicing mental health counselor in the state of Louisiana, and I don't want my clients to find me. So, I am a human being, and I would be lying if I said I have not Googled my own mental health counselors in the past out of curiosity. And in fact, we were actually taught in school how to not necessarily conceal our identities, because look, we're human beings that exist out in the world, and we're not trying to hide that, or we're not trying to pretend like we're something that we're not. But in our ethics class, we did go through a whole process where we searched ourselves on the internet. We saw what was out there. We thought about what that would be like for clients to see that. And it is something that we have to think about, what we put out there in the world, and how that might interfere the therapeutic relationship that we keep with clients, how it might prevent a dual relationship, that sort of thing. And so that being said, because I do want to get very personal with this podcast as time goes on, I prefer people not to find me. And so that's why I'm using my husband's last name for this podcast. So for the sake of this podcast, my name is Jamie Toops. Now, don't get me wrong. I know that it's not, clients may find me, and that's okay. That's okay. I'll deal with it when it happens. And I'm not going to say anything in here that I'm ashamed of. I will also never, ever breach confidentiality. You'll never hear me talk about clients unless it's something that's super broad and sweeping. So just wanted to clear that up. And so but while we're talking about professional identity, I did want to talk a little bit more about who I am as a professional and why you may or may not want to hear what I have to say about mental health care. So this may make you change your mind after you hear what I have to say. So, I did mention in my intro that I do have a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, and I did graduate with honors. I would just throw that out there. I am a self-proclaimed nerd. That does come to play in my mental health career, I will say. Like, I do very much have that. I'm very strong on that side of the brain that, it is very nuanced when it comes to understanding emotions and feelings and the gray areas of things, creativity. but I also very much have that side of my brain that needs flowcharts and maths and spreadsheets. And sometimes those sides of the brains, they don't agree with each other about stuff. And I will say that it's both a good thing and a bad thing. And so that absolutely plays a part in my professional identity. And I'm sure I will talk more about that later. But yeah, I have only ever met, I will say, almost every mental health counselor that I have met, save probably one, and I'm talking all of them, had a prior career. And I have only met one person that was a chemical engineer. I've only met one person, period, that was an engineer in their prior career. I didn't think I'd ever find anybody, but I found one. And so even that was amazing. So with that being said, yeah, I spent, we'll just say 12 years in oil and gas. Here's another little fun fact. During that time, I spent 3-ish years working offshore. So offshore on platforms, drilling for oil. I was a drilling and measurements engineer, which means I was responsible for some really super fancy tools that drillers use to find and drill for oil, to find the best and most lucrative wells. And I absolutely have a love-hate relationship with that career. Most of my offshore work was done in the country of Qatar. It's a tiny little country, very wealthy country. So I lived there for a little while. I lived in the United Arab Emirates for a lot of training. And the offshore platform that I primarily worked on was owned and operated by Egyptians, but it was operated by people from all over the world. And so my absolutely favorite part of that experience was literally working with people and cultures from all over the world in this environment where you don't leave. I worked the type of work. I know a lot of folks that work in oil and gas, they work it's called shift work. They'll work, 3 weeks on and they'll have 3 weeks off. Not me. I was a straight up expatriate, which means you reside in the country where you work away from home, essentially. So I would go and just stay on the job no matter how long that would be for. Sometimes that would be 2 weeks and sometimes that would be months living and not go home. Like you live on the platform out in the middle of the ocean. And so like these people become your family. So you just literally no time to do it. Like you're working and you're getting to know people. And so I just got to learn about other cultures and the way other people live. But not only just learn, like I'm experiencing it with people in real time and cooperating with people and living with people in real time. 9 times out of 10, more than that, 9.5 times out of 10, I was the only female on this offshore platform and was totally treated like a princess. That was not always a good thing. I was never mistreated, but sometimes it went too far where it was the point of like, hello, I can do my own work. I can take care of myself. Thank you. Kind of swung too far in the direction of like, let me help you with that. Like, no, thanks. I got it. But I was treated very well, I will say, in that part of my career. And so that was one of the most amazing and challenging times of my life. And just really, really taught me the value of learning about other people and being immersed in community and getting outside of familiar things. Before that, I was born and raised and lived in rural Alabama where, there's not many outsiders there and you're not exposed to any different way of living. Straight up, after I graduated college in 4 years, bailed the fuck out of there. I was like, let me go as far away from home as I can. Literally went around the world. I highly recommend everybody do it at one point in your life. Maybe not to that extreme, but get out of your comfort zone, go somewhere and meet people that you would not normally interact with and immerse yourself in other cultures. It will really change your outlook on life and how much you trust other people, how much you relate to other people, the values that you have. And yeah, it helps you challenge your own belief systems. I mean, it radically changed who I was as a person. So that's sort of my irrelevant early oil and gas experience. I mean, from there, I ended up working in oil refineries where I spent lots of time climbing up the big towers that you see and flying around on helicopters and doing all kinds of fun stuff. Yeah. Unfulfilling. So during the pandemic, I started going on my own deep dive into mental health because I have struggled with mental health I've struggled my whole life with complex PTSD and general anxiety and depression, and who knows, maybe some other stuff, but those are the main things. But so there was a point, I've explored my own mental health off and on through the years, but before the pandemic, I really started doing a deep dive into my own mental health. And there's a couple books that I read that I feel were really big turning points for me. And I think at some point I'm going to talk more about like very specific instances in my life that I feel like were turning points in my own mental health. But for now, still kind of trying to stay on the professional aspect of it. One of the books was From Surviving to Thriving by Pete Walker, which is a book entirely about complex PTSD. When I read that book, there was just about not a single word of that book that I did not resonate with, and it really changed my life. Another book was The Body Keeps the Score by Basil Vanderkopf, and that book it's basically what it sounds like, about how our body encodes trauma, and the issues are in the tissues is a phrase I have since learned. And then there's another book by Daryl Hammond, who it's autobiographical. He was on Saturday Night Live, and it's called God, If You're Not Up There, I'm Fucked. And it was about his own personal journey through trauma and recovery. And I read those books, and first of all, just had a huge turn in my own mental health, my own self-discovery journey. And I was just reading and consuming books nonstop. And at the same time, I was feeling so unfulfilled in my professional life. And at this point, I was working for a company that was amazing. This company that I worked for was as good as it got. Like, I had changed jobs, I had changed types of jobs, I had changed roles, I had changed the types of things that I was doing over the course of 12 years, and just really didn't find fulfillment in any of it. I was making a lot of money, and the job that I was in was as good as it was going to get. I felt like it was the people were amazing, the management was amazing, the company culture was amazing. Like, there was nothing wrong with this job, and I was still unfulfilled. And I was like, if this is not going to work, then this is never going to work. And the problem then began, well, what am I going to do? Like, if not this, then what am I going to do? And so I started just exploring and looking into things and thinking and soul searching, like, where do I see myself, down the road? I was like, okay, well, I'm already super interested in mental health. I'm already basically researching and studying in my own free time anyway. This sounds like something I can do. And so I then took some classes, just some bachelor's level classes, just to kind of explore. I absolutely love them. I've always loved school. What can I say? And so after looking through options for a master's program, I discovered Antioch University, which is they do have a home base in New England, in Keene, New Hampshire. But I attended their online program and had the most amazing experience. But I chose Antioch, and this is where they truly, truly fulfilled their mission, and why I will never, ever regret getting an education with them. And I'm just so thankful for the education I got with them. Their program is foundational in social justice. So everything that I learned in my master's program was through the lens of social justice, meaning taking mental health care in through the context of each individual's culture. And what that means is every individual is different, and they're going to require individualized care. But it also requires me as a therapist to understand a little bit about, and I'm not going to be able to know a little bit about every culture there is out there, but it is on me to know a little bit about the people that I'm going to be serving. And what that means is, okay, so diagnosis, for example. So it's not fair to diagnose someone from a culture who values talking to spirits, for example, like indigenous people. It's not ethical to pathologize their way of living in the same way that might present with someone from a Western culture. I don't really believe anybody should be pathologized for really much of anything, to be completely honest. But that's just me as a therapist. More on that later. But that's just one of many, many, many examples of different seeing people, how people live their lives in different cultures really impacts how you work with them. Or, for example, in crisis counseling, that LGBTQ plus youth are at the highest rate of suicide. Another, again, just to kind of throw out another example, African American men are some of the least likely folks to seek counseling due to the stigma in the community overall of talking about problems outside of their community. And so I very much valued learning about being a socially just counselor from Antioch University. It has been immensely helpful in the work that I do, and I know it will continue to be. And it's something that very much aligns with the values of who I am as a person and as a therapist, and now who I want to continue to be as a therapist. And so I graduated last year in August of 2023. Here's a little bit of an inside peek into what it takes to become a mental health counselor. So you have to have certain prerequisites to go into the master's program, which honestly, it's not as much as you would think. It's really just a bachelor's degree in something. And some universities require some other prerequisites than others. At some point, I finished my actual classwork at Antioch, and then you have to do one practicum, which is basically, it's just a different word for a mini internship. So a mini internship, and then 2 full semesters of internship. So basically I did a fall, a spring, and then a summer, a practicum, and then 2 internships. And those where I'm actually seeing clients. I'm actually seeing clients at that point. Like, I'm still in school. The good thing about practicum and internships is that you are able to get real life experience. And so, yeah, that went on for a year. And I will say it's not paid. So at that point, like during school, I'm paying for school still. And rare exception, I've known 2 people from my program that actually got paid for their internships and practicums, but generally speaking, they're not paid. So on the plus side for clinicians, it's good practice. It's also really good for clients. I'll tell you 2 reasons why it's good for clients. So if you're ever presented with the opportunity to see an intern, there's really 2 good reasons why I suggest that you see an intern. First of all, it's almost universally more inexpensive, so it's cheaper just because of, they are learning. Second of all, you are never going to get someone who is under more supervision and is going to have the information more fresh in their brain at that time. And so you're getting the freshest, most supervised person to be able to talk to. And besides, the counseling is mostly about the therapeutic relationship anyway. So if you're looking for a counselor, find the person that you just feel comfortable with. So then I did my internships and practicums, and then I graduated with a Master's of Arts of Clinical Mental Health Counseling, and I also have a trauma certificate. Yeah, so one of these is my bachelor's degree. One of these is my master's degree. And if you're seeing this on video, I'm pointing at the degrees that are all hanging around my room. One of these is, I think that's my trauma certificate, which just means that I did extra work to be able to qualify me to say that I have a trauma certificate. So, yeah. And so that was a graduation. And so that's been about a year ago now. And so I've been practicing as what's called a provisionally licensed professional counselor in the state of Louisiana. Once you graduate, even though you've already done these internships under supervision, you're still not considered fully licensed. So you have a provisional license. And so you still have to collect so many hours under a board supervisor that you have to pay until you're fully licensed. And so for me, in order to get fully licensed, I have to collect 2,000 direct hours. That means face-to-face, sitting across from clients. And so basically, yeah. And I'm also not allowed to accept insurance. I'm not allowed to work in private practice as a provision licensed person. So therefore, yeah, it makes it hard for me to get clients because people have to pay out of pocket. And it just makes healthcare more inaccessible, and it makes it harder for me to get hours, which makes it harder to get licensed so that I can take insurance. Pretty tough, y'all. I knew that this was going to be a tough road when I got started, but, obviously you don't know until you actually get into it how tough it's going to be. And I don't want this to detour anybody from getting into mental health care because it is not the same for everybody. For a long time, up until this point, I have chosen to work part-time. I work at a nonprofit, and I can also see clients who can't afford to pay for therapy, generally speaking. And so I am able to build somewhat of a caseload. And so, there's folks that can get fully licensed within a couple years by working in an agency like, inpatient facilities, intensive outpatient. So it's not totally limiting. This is just a little bit of, I have a wee bit of beef with how difficult of a process it is to become a mental health counselor, considering the limited access there is. in this country. And, also I know the reason behind it is to protect the public. You want to make sure that people are qualified and experienced to be able to help people. But, I don't know. I don't know if it should be necessarily this hard, but we'll see. We'll see what tune I'm singing in a couple years. Anywho, I have done a lot of training. Like, you also have to collect so many training hours, every year when you're licensed and provisionally licensed, which you have to pay for those trainings. And of course, anything that you want to consider yourself licensed or certified in, you have to, pursue that on your own time and dime. So since graduation, I have done quite a lot of training. The major thing that there's really 3 areas where I feel most competent. And well, let me just preface this by saying, y'all, that I don't think that I will ever say that I specialize in anything. I don't care if I've been practicing for 50 years, if I've had all the trainings that are available to me ever. I just cannot picture a world where I say that I'm an expert in something. That's me. Like, that's just me personally. With my full belief is that people are experts on themselves. And because I have never walked in someone's shoes for the entirety of their life, like, I will never be an expert on anything to do with anybody because I have never walked in their shoes for their entire life. I know that sounds extreme, but like, my belief is people are experts on themselves. And so I don't think there's a scenario where I will ever call myself an expert in anything. There is some ethical considerations in my field where you're not supposed to call yourself an expert in things, without some kind of proof. But then how do you prove that? Like, how does one prove that they're an expert in something? Like, so I just have a little bit of a problem with that word. If you think you're an expert in something, then good for you. I'm glad that you feel confident enough to say that, and you've earned that. Good for you. There's some areas where I feel more competent than others. Oh, also, since I'm pointing, degrees out on the wall and certificates, next to my trauma certificate is my national counselor certification. And so that is a special designation that you get once you've passed your national counselor examination, which every counselor has to pass after you graduate. And then you have to be nominated to be an NCC by somebody that basically says that you're of good moral character and you're trustworthy or some shit. And then there's a few other steps. And so after you complete the steps, you've been nominated, you've passed the test, then you get a national certified counselor designation. And so I have that. So that's one of those many letters beside my name. So, but that is another certification I just have to keep up. Every 5 years, I have to complete so many trainings and prove that I did those trainings. And they have their own code of ethics on top of the American Counseling Association's code of ethics. So yeah, it's a lot. So areas where I think I'm competent. I will start out by saying that while I was in school, to get more practice before I even started my practicum and internship, because I felt totally unequipped to sit in front of a client. So I was like, I need some practice here. And plus I really wanted to, at that point, I wasn't going back into like the middle of my master's degree. I wasn't doing any volunteer work at the time. And since I've been back in the United States from working overseas, there hasn't been a period where I haven't been done volunteer work. And that doesn't jive with who I am as a human. And so like, I just need to be doing something to like give to like, to be giving back to the community, essentially. And so that's been dog fostering, dog volunteering, adoption duties, that sort of thing for many years. It wasn't really possible with my elder dogs at the moment. And so for a long time, I've been volunteering with the Trevor Project, which is what that is. Now, they put you through a very intense training program on suicide prevention and suicide crisis intervention. So I went through their training and I was a digital crisis volunteer for a couple years. Which was both extremely scary and extremely satisfying work to be able to, again, because I said that in the beginning of this podcast, that the Trevor Project is a crisis line for LGBTQ plus youth, even though anybody can use it. I want to make that clear. They don't gatekeep. So it's a group that needs it the most. And so with that being said, it felt very fulfilling to be able to support people but also it was rough. I would get people who were acutely suicidal, and it was scary sometimes. I had to stopped a couple months ago, y'all, and I don't feel great about that. I had to stop a couple months ago because it was really getting to me. It felt like every single person that was texting in was just fear and panic about the state of the world. Everybody was in this existential crisis about the state of the world. And it was one of those things where, we were trained very well on how to handle that sort of thing. People just need somebody to be there with them, even if it is over a computer, just like to know that somebody is on the other side that gives a shit, that's going to just sit there with them, not try to fix things, tell them that that their life matters, and help them just sit there and breathe, literally just like that, just the basic, just the bare basics of humanity. And I know there's a big part of me that knew how to do the job, that knew what to do. There's also a big part of me that, because it was like, it just became a common theme of this, like, of fear and panic and existential dread, the helplessness, the hopelessness, not being able to do anything about it, like, just really started to, like, infect me. And like, I couldn't do anymore, y'all. I hope to be able, which really sucks, because honestly, that service needs help more now than ever, because people are in crisis right now, and that line is being defunded by the current administration. And so there's a big part of me that feels actually really ashamed right now to sit here and say that, like, I abandoned that volunteer work at its highest need, but I burn out after 2 years, and I could not stop taking on. At some point, I wasn't good for anybody. That's one thing I've learned so far as a therapist is I am not okay. I cannot be okay for other people. And in fact, it could cause harm. Like, if I'm in a place where I can't support people, that's my bullshit going to start leaking out onto other people. And so that's kind of where I got with that. I hope to go back to it one day. But right now I'm volunteering with a local organization in town called the Inner Pup, which is a nonprofit that their mission is Heartworm Zero, to prevent heartworms in dogs and cats. And they also provide low cost veterinary access. And it kind of gets to go back to my love for animals and serving underprivileged communities. So I feel competent to deal with crisis. I feel competent in working with the LGBTQ community, just for that reason, because I have experience working with them. And I feel competent working with neurodivergent folks, and I'm going to save all that for the podcast. I feel competent working with trauma because of my certification, and I am level 1 brain spotting trained. They even gave me a wand. Look, y'all, I am a magician. This is a tool that I use for that practice. And so I am on my way to getting a brain spotting certification. I do plan to do a whole podcast on brain spotting, because I have a movie in mind that I actually use to reference when my clients that I know have seen, that are like horror movie fans. I use this movie when I tell them how brain spotting works. And so I cannot wait to talk about brain spotting more through the lens of this movie. But essentially, to tell you what brain spotting is, I know that most everybody has heard about EMDR, which is a trauma processing modality. It can use bilateral stimulation, you can use tapping, and it's meant to reprocess traumatic memories in a way that they no longer impact you in a traumatic way. It doesn't impact your nervous system anymore. And so it's trauma recovery. And so brain spotting is the next wave, I guess you can say, now of EMDR, where that is exactly what we do. We reprocess trauma by using memories, your brain, body, trauma that's being held in your body, your mind, memories, and help process it and heal that way. So yeah, that's what I'm working on. Through school, I was taught to do therapy from Rogerian. So Carl Rogers is sort of the father of the type of therapy that I was taught at Antioch, which is person-centered therapy, which again is very much this idea that people are in charge of their own healing. People know themselves better than I ever could. And a lot of that is, the concept behind that is just holding space for people to heal. The act of creating safety by itself is healing. And so I learned how to create such a space to where people feel comfortable and heard and can heal from. And so I feel quite competent in Rogerian therapy at this point because it's something I always fall back to when I feel stuck as a therapist. And then my mentor for the past couple of years has been teaching me internal family systems, which I know I've talked a lot about on both of the podcasts, which is this idea that we're all made up of parts. And I know that I've talked a lot of it from like, yeah, part of me this, part of me that, but it goes a lot deeper than that. And I do want to do a much deeper dive podcast on this. It really is it is really a quite spiritual, mindful, meditative modality where you go inside, you actually meet these different parts of yourselves, you hear their stories, you help them unburden. And again, it goes really nicely hand in hand with Rogerian therapy because it's all about hearing yourself. Instead of silencing that critical voice, instead of silencing that part of you that wants to go do something fun or, whatever it may be, it's about hearing it out. Doesn't necessarily mean giving into it or whatever, but it means hearing it out and understanding it. And there's so much healing in that. And the movie Inside Out is such a good representation of what that looks like. All of our parts have individual personalities, and they can have names, they can have their own desires, and it can be quite a spiritual and very rich experience to actually do internal family systems therapy with people. I'm not formally trained in that, but I've done enough of my own IFS therapy and of mentoring, and it is such an organic modality. And yeah, you don't actually have to have a formal training in all of these things as long as you're not running around saying, I'm certified or I'm an expert, exactly what I said earlier. I also work with couples. And so for my couples, I do what's called emotionally focused therapy, which the way I introduce emotionally focused therapy to people is I say, if you could have logicked your way out of your problems, you would have done it already. Because my clients are smart. You're all smart people. If you could have figured this out, or if you could have logicked your solutions already, you would have done it already. And so the whole premise behind emotionally focused therapy is that the healing is in the feelings. So there's two empirically validated couples therapies. One is called Gottman, and one is emotionally focused therapy. Empirically validated just means that there's been research, it's proven that it works. And so the reason emotionally focused therapy works is because, again, it takes us out of our head, out of that logic, and it gets us into our feelings. And what is it about the way you're feeling or the way you're hearing something that is preventing you from connecting with your partner? It's all about creating positive attachments with your partner. Has your partner ever told you something and they tell you, pass me the remote, but what you actually hear is, I fucking hate you right now? That's an extreme example, right? But sometimes your partner says something to you and you hear it a completely different way because there's something about the way they're saying it, or maybe something happened a moment before that, that didn't have anything to do with your partner that triggered something in you. And this goes nicely with parts work also, because what part of you was at the driver's seat at that moment that you were saying this thing, and then what part of this other person was at the driver's seat that was ready to receive that information. And sometimes there's a big misalignment, right? And so it's about aligning those parts to where you're able to give and receive information in a way that feels connected. So emotionally focused therapy is about dropping down into those feelings and creating secure attachments with partners. By the way, I don't advertise as couples therapy. I advertise as relationship therapy, because we do not exclude people who are not in just couples. So, yep, I am a poly and non-monogamy affirming therapist. So yeah, that's a little bit about my career and areas where I feel competent. I have gotten feedback from clients that my superpower as a therapist really is creating that safety for them and making them feel heard and not judged. And that is what I'm most proud of. There's probably nothing nicer that someone could say to me, either personally or professionally. That's probably my number one value as probably a person and a therapist. And so that's what I'm going to keep doing. I just want to thank everybody again so much for so many people that have come out and followed my social medias, followed the podcast, who have sent me comments either on social media, through my text messages, through the podcast to say how much you've enjoyed or gotten out of the couple episodes that we released, that y'all enjoyed Ryan being on. He's definitely going to come back and do more. The next episode is going to be a solo venture. And then in 2 weeks, I've got a special guest coming on. And then I think after that, I'm actually going to have another guest come on. So I've had so many people like want to do episodes with me, which is so exciting because I know it's going to be so much more interesting when I'm not just sitting here blabbing. Please continue sending your suggestions, your questions. I am literally incorporating everything that y'all are telling me right now, at least up to the point where it feels, organic. I mean, but nobody has said anything yet that doesn't feel good. All right, friends. Well, for me, the demon that I got to exercise today was a little bit of that imposter syndrome demon that feels like we are not allowed to brag. We are not allowed to talk about ourselves. We are not allowed to be proud of our accomplishments. And that by even objectively talking about our resume or our timeline, that's going to sound pompous. And I think by being able to make this episode, I feel like this feels like a big deal. So thank you so much for listening. And I love learning about all of you as well. And so I hope that maybe this will encourage you all too to be proud of what you do, and that there is a difference I think there's a difference in bragging and sharing yourself with others. And y'all asked and I'm telling. So there you go. I think I think therein lies a little bit of how to tell the difference is y'all met me with curiosity and I'm responding with openness. So that's some principles of internal family systems, by the way, y'all. Openness and curiosity. I've been thinking about how I want to end my podcast with like some kind of like sign off or like, I don't know, catchphrase or something. And there's a friend of mine who I talk to quite often. And she loves to, well, at first she picked on me a little bit about it affectionately, but then she started leaning into it herself and it kind of became her thing. And I think I'm going to just lean into that here and just make it my own, make it my sign off. And it goes a little bit like this. Okay, bye.